Manar Adley, founder, director of Mint Press News, an absolutely unmissable Mint Press News. And behind the headlines, she's up first this evening, and very glad I am to welcome her to the mother of all talk shows. Manar, let's start with the big enchilada. There's huge speculation right now that the United States is about to bomb Iran all over again. And yet it's only yesterday that Donald Trump was talking about a resumption of negotiations with them. What do you think this all means?
Well, I think it's quite obvious that Donald Trump is being pulled in many different directions, which has left him very unhinged on social media and in the statements that he's releasing about this unprovoked military war against Iran, a war that most Americans don't want. And most importantly, his own base, the MAGA supporters, they actually don't want this war either. And as you perfectly presented it, many of the most influential pundits and politicians amongst his base have actually turned against him because they don't want this war against Iran, and they're sounding the alarm that Israel's war policies are not good for America. And I know that there's a lot to disagree with the people that support Trump and the entire MAGA movement. But on this, George, I think we have to unite on all political and sectarian fronts and stand against this Israeli war against Iran. And so we really don't know what could happen. But what we do know is that Trump is surrounded by many Zionist actors from the Israel lobby, from the pro-Israel lobby, and many Israeli-funded think tanks in Washington, D.C. that are funded by weapons manufacturers like Lockheed Martin and Boeing and General Dynamics and Raytheon and others, and many other pro-war neocons that he wanted to drain the swamp out of Washington, but he's still surrounded by those people. And so they're pushing him to continue to expand this war against Iran. Netanyahu wants this war, and he is working in the background with Trump, kind of like that little devil in his ear, to convince him to expand this war. But his base is turning against him, and this could cause a lot of problems here locally. And I do want to mention that the United States, although we're not in a sort of direct, quote unquote, war with Iran, the United States has been providing Israel with all of the means, all of the arms, and all of the intelligence to bomb Iran, to sabotage Iran, and to carry out assassination campaigns. So the United States is actively in a shadow war against Iran. But of course, if Trump allows the United States to expand this war against Iran, it would be completely devastating to the whole world, not just Iran. And Iran is not in Iraq. It would be devastating to the US economy and to the US military. We're dealing with a country that has a large mass citizenship of their country that are ready to stand up and defend their country against an attack against the United States and Israel. Whereas here in the United States, we have a weakened military. You know, we are so-called the strongest military in the world, but we also have a large mass movement here against the war with Iran. And a lot of those movements, are being led by military servicemen. So I don't see this beneficial, and we don't know what's going to happen, but I don't think that this is going to be a good thing for the United States.
I mean, there's two schools of thought, Manar. One, which I think I still, but only narrowly share, which is that Trump is unhinged, that he is losing it, that this savage veering from one side to the other, this apparently nihilistic wrecking of his own base and discarding his best friends, that this is all a symptom of utter recklessness. Others, very respected people like Brian Belichick, for example, highly respected critic, they think this is all an act and that Trump intended all of this and intends all of this, that there's no mental instability about it, that it's all a plan, was all planned, and it's all going to plan. Where do you come down on these two, this dichotomy, if you like?
Well, that's an interesting take. And I think Trump, if we've learned anything about him, he likes to talk a big talk. I mean, look at what the United States just did in Iran when they struck those nuclear facilities. He came on camera to give a press release to say that it was magnificent and brilliant, and it really shows just how strong the US military in America are. And, you know, we had to rely on Trump to basically shut down and close down Iran's nuclear program. So I personally don't think that Trump wants this war, but I think he's trying to give Israel something to show that he is in support of Israel's actions. And so, you know, on one hand, I'm of the belief that he's very well aware of what he's doing. He is listening to his advisors. He is being influenced by them. But he doesn't like that he's doing that. That's just my personal opinion, of course, and many would maybe disagree with me. And so that's why we're seeing kind of this unhinged appearing behavior. But I do think it is well thought out. He's being advised by some of the most sophisticated neocons that brought us the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan. And so I think that that's possible. However, I think all of this really is a distraction to what Israel is doing in Gaza. Israel is the one who's truly acting unhinged with the full support of the US and UK government, committing a genocide and, you know, acting in enforcing a mass starvation campaign in Gaza. And so we have this war against Iran building up as a distraction so that Netanyahu can stay in power, while we have countries like the UK and their media trying to paint people like Bobby Villain as the villain, for their chants, death to the IDF, when really it's Israel that is acting unhinged and committing a genocide.
Now, Netanyahu's not coming for nothing. I'm sure he's not coming to Washington for a drink and a celebration. He's got America's complete support. Trump even threatened the judge that's dealing with Netanyahu's case, warned him to drop the charges, pardon Netanyahu. Well, that hasn't happened yet, but the court hearing a couple of days ago was postponed because of expected regional developments this week. This is the third visit of Netanyahu since Trump took office again. What do you think they're up to?
I think that Trump wants a war, an expanded war against Iran, and I think that Netanyahu wants more weapons and more cooperation from regional actors in the region. You know, just this week we had Syria's leader, Ahmed al-Shara, meet with Netanyahu as well, so that Israel can get their full cooperation in bombing Iran and also maybe handing over the Golan Heights to Israel. And so Netanyahu is trying to avoid any sort of criminal charges against him locally by the Israeli court. And so he is trying to expand and enter Israel in this endless war state, from continuing to bomb Lebanon, to bomb, to take as much land as they can from Syria, and to target and attack the people of Yemen and their leadership and their resistance there, continue its genocide, and expand the war against Iran. Netanyahu's, agenda in Iran has always been regime change, and they know they can't do that without the help of the United States to basically overthrow the government in Iran. And so that's what I believe that's going to be discussed this week. so that Netanyahu can continue to stay in power as long as he can, to continue the mass slaughter of Gaza and to continue these escalations so that, while he is leading a military to ethnically cleanse Gaza.
I'll come back to Gaza in a minute, I promise you, but staying on the Iran track for a moment, it didn't work out well the last time. I mean, by all accounts, vast expenditure was made by Israel and by the American taxpayers, by extension, on trying to repel ballistic missile technology that was increasingly likely to hit its targets. And we now know that many of the targets that the Iranian missiles hit were extremely high value indeed, and that the Israeli public suffered huge economic losses and huge losses in morale. So if they hit Iran again, Iran's going to hit back again, just like they did the last time and maybe more. So how do Netanyahu and Trump win from that?
Well, they don't. It's more for this kind of political theater to show that they are, the leaders in military might around the world. I mean, we're talking about the United States that launched a war against, that is engaged in an endless war on terror. It, launched a war against Afghanistan, Iraq, overthrew the governments of Libya, engaged in a sectarian civil war in Syria. They're currently bombing Yemen. I mean, and then not to mention all of the NATO efforts and AFRICOM efforts across Africa and trying to overthrow the governments of Venezuela and Cuba and all the sabotage that they're involved in. And so this to me looks like just a military might show. But it's a war that I don't think that the US or Israel would win. I mean, the majority of the population around the world is against this escalation. They don't want this war. And so that's really what I think would happen.
Yeah, unfortunately, the majority and democracy and so on are of very little moment in these decisions. So this 60-day ceasefire that Netanyahu has agreed to, Trump triumphantly told us, there's no mention if the people they're fighting have agreed to it. Have you looked at the details in this ceasefire, Manar?
No, I personally have not looked into the details of the ceasefire, but I do know that, Israel wants to continue to bomb and destroy as much as they can inside of Iran. That's why they've engaged in a lot of sabotage, working with Mossad to do internal destruction and car bombings and attacks on nuclear scientists. So based on Israel's history of ceasefires, and them violating every single one when it comes to the war against, Lebanon or the war in Gaza, Israel is not to be trusted. And so whether a ceasefire will be signed or not, I think it will give some people some hope that this war is going to be over, but Israel and the United States will continue to be in a shadow war against Iran. The war against Iran did not just start in the last couple of weeks. I mean, Israel worked with the United States to assassinate Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in Trump's last term. And again, that was just a show of might on the behalf of the Trump administration, because after that, they kind of backed off and stopped. And Iran did respond kind of in an equal manner by targeting US bases, and then they also stopped. But Israel continued. They continued to assassinate nuclear scientists. They continue to fund terrorist groups like the MEK to sabotage internally inside of Iran. And they're working actively on the ground in Iran to try to turn the citizens of Iran against their government to overthrow their government. But this time, what I'm seeing from speaking to regular Iranians is that even the ones that oppose the government, who are not happy with the government, they don't want the US and they don't want Israeli involvement in this war. They said, we have to take matters into our own hands, and the people of Iran should, in the end, decide their fate, not Western colonial powers like the United States and Israel.
Well, there's a lot of evidence that national unity in Iran is breaking out, as certainly I predicted before all this began would happen. Many Iranians are extremely religious, but many Iranians are extremely nationalistic, viscerally so. And what's happened, I think, is that both of these forces have fused together in rejection of this kind of bullying. Lastly, Manar, I address you now as a woman journalist. I've lost hope that the media will ever become interested in beheaded children, at least not Palestinian ones that actually did exist before they were beheaded. I long ago gave up the idea that so-called feminists in the Western world would give a damn about the huge number of women murdered in Gaza. But this week, yesterday or the day before, an internet space filled with journalists and correspondents filing their stories, sitting trying to charge up their phones, was deliberately bombed in Gaza by Israel, and a huge flow of blood of journalists, broadcasters, and so on was running across the floor, out the doors, and into the sea. I haven't seen a single report about it in any Western media. So they don't even care that people like them are being massacred by Israel in Gaza. They're still talking about a guy, a rapper at Glastonbury, for God's sake. I mean, what do you make of the complete unwillingness of Western journalists to care even about the slaughter of other journalists?
Well, first of all, George, let's make one thing very clear. You specifically put every Western corporate media broadcaster and journalist to shame. And people like Piers Morgan and the BBC, journalists at the BBC, could learn a lot from you, because they're treating Bob Vylan's chant in Glastonbury, death, death to the IDF, as it was broadcasted live on the BBC, as if that is hate speech. Meanwhile, they want us to care about the baby killers, about the killers, the IDF mass murderers that are slaughtering our people in Gaza. These corporate media outlets pretend to care about so-called liberal values and feminism and women's rights, while Israel is systematically assassinating, they're targeting journalists on purpose so that their message cannot be broadcast to the world. And we have yet to hear from these corporate media outlets about anything that Israel has killed. I mean, the number last time, we spoke, it was like around over 200 journalists that Israel has attacked and killed. I'm sure that number is far higher now. And every single day we are witnessing the mass slaughter of more women, of more children who are getting their limbs blown off. Palestinian children is creating the world's largest cohort of amputees in modern history. And none of these crimes would even be possible without the support of the British state that is supplying the F-35 fighter jets to the Israeli military to drop bombs. And now the BBC and other pundits within British media want us to believe that the story here is Bob Vylan's chant in Glastonbury, death, death to the IDF. And they want us to defend the rights and the feelings of the soldiers that are mass murdering people in Gaza. We have to remember that just last week we had testimonies of Israeli soldiers that said that they were like the Nazis in Gaza and the Palestinians were the Jews. And so what Bob Vylan did is literally a bare minimum act of defiance by artists in the face of a genocide to draw attention to the British complicity and hypocrisy in the mass murder and slaughter of Palestinians. And something I just want to mention, the story here is of course not Bob Villain, it's not Kneecap, and it's definitely not Palestine Action. It's the British politicians pushing to criminalize speech under the guise of fighting hate speech and anti-Semitism. The real story here is Israel's genocide and British and Western complicity. They are distracting us from the fact that not only should Israel and its politicians and military be tried for war crimes, but so should the Western governments, including the US and British state, for their assistance in this massacre. And now, just more irony and hypocrisy, the US State Department has actually revoked the visa of Bob Villain from performing in the US because he's deemed as a dangerous individual, while you just mentioned to us, George, that war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu is scheduled to visit the United States later this month to talk about expanding more war. So once again, this is the hypocrisy, this is the moral depravity of Western democracies on full display.
Just incidentally, they have just murdered the head of the Indonesian hospital in Gaza, an eminent surgeon, the head of an Indonesian hospital, along with his wife and children. They have just murdered them, a senior medical figure in a hospital paid for by the most populous Muslim country in the world, namely Indonesia. There's no limits to these people. There is no restriction, no shame. That's the world that we're living in, and we're being asked to be on the side of the mass murderers of doctors and women and children and journalists and broadcasters and poets and painters.